Among the many movie nerd movies of my youth, one remains to receive routine popularity and well-regard. Richard Kelly's 2001 psychological thriller Donnie Darko continues to impress new film nerds despite being what I see as very much a product of its time. I feel like other movies that were very much the gateway movie buff films, like The Boondock Saints or The Machinist, haven't retained the same staying power. It even remains one of my all-time favorites, unlike those others, which I also love. How is it that this very early 2000s-ish movie continues to captivate viewers? How are people still connecting with it despite some of its more cringe and cheesy scenes?
Where do I sit?
Sit next to the boy you think is the cutest.
Quiet!
Let her choose.
Yeah, that's just like too goofy. But people still glean something great out of this movie. We've previously noted how many elements of post-secular storytelling and thinking can be found in older cultural products, such as Dune. Despite being written in the 1960s, Dune has experienced a modern revival in our post-secular moment. I believe Donnie Darko also resonates with this era, offering poignant and insightful commentary even 2 decades after its release. What does a movie about a mentally ill teenager who encounters a demonic bunny and becomes entangled in quantum physics and metaphysical realities have to say about our current cultural moment? How did it anticipate our post-secular age? These are the questions we'll explore as we delve into the world of Donnie Darko. Welcome to Analysis with Alex, your online literature and media studies classroom. Here, we regain the goodness and power of the stories we tell. If you want to join me in getting past the manufactured schlock and nihilism many studios produce now, consider subscribing. My wife Grace also joins me in this series on post-secularism to bring her background in sociology. Before we dive in, thank you so much for watching and listening. I will be spoiling Donnie Darko throughout, so if that's something that bothers you, I recommend you save this video for later, go watch the movie first, and then come back. I also recommend the director's cut over the traditional theatrical release, as that's the one I'll be analyzing here. Central to Donnie Darko's plot is Donnie's struggles with mental health. It's never explicitly stated what sort of disorder Donnie experiences, though one can see how schizophrenia, depression, and extreme anxiety appear in the character. In addition to Donnie's actual mental conditions is his ongoing battle to determine if he should or shouldn't take his meds. The character expresses feelings of being off and numbed when on his meds, yet when he's not on them, he experiences frank and other strange, possibly supernatural phenomena. In essence, Donnie's central conflict is existential despair, which helps make the movie a timeless story. Donnie, despite being a teenager who gets caught in debates about how the Smurfs repopulate, struggles to understand his ontological being, which is to say, he struggles to understand the nature of his existence and his purpose in life. The movie works to establish how the institutions and systems around him, including upper middle class American culture, provide little to no answer for him other than taking his meds to feel, quote, normal. This theme of despair resonates deeply because we can trace it back to the beginning of Western existential philosophy with figures like Soren Kierkegaard, as he writes in 1849's The Sickness Unto Death, quote, the relation to himself is something a human being cannot be rid of, just as little as he can be rid of himself, which for that matter is one and the same thing. Since the self is indeed the relation to oneself. With despair, a fire takes hold in something that cannot burn, or cannot be burned up, the self. To despair over oneself and despair to want to be rid of oneself is the formula of all despair, end quote.
This sounds sort of familiar, yeah? Donnie Darko approaches the struggle to remove oneself and understands one's despair in a few ways. First and foremost, the story's central conflict is the meds. A combination of Jake Gyllenhaal's performance and the movie's staging of him often makes Donnie appear like a zombie or ghoul when he takes his meds, frequently wearing a hood over his head, slouching and roaming about. Yet, he wonders if it's worth it not to take them to receive possible delusions about the end times from a demonic bunny. This turmoil, the sense of despair and mental health concerns still exists among teenagers in our current cultural moment. The struggle to face one's despair in a Western affluent country is at an all-time high for teenagers. As reported by the United Hospital Fund in May 2024, over the past decade, national surveys of youth have shown an increase in the prevalence of behavioral health conditions. More specifically, among all age groups, adolescents aged 12 to 17 have experienced the highest year-over-year increase in having a major depressive episode since 2010. To highlight the gravity of this trend, in 2021, the United States Surgeon General declared a behavioral health crisis among our youth. While the COVID-19 pandemic contributed to the increased prevalence of behavioral health conditions among adolescents, worsening trends existed before March 2020. This positions Donnie Darko's 2001 release at the beginning stage of this ramping teenage mental health crisis. Now, it would take an extensive video to fully cover the various factors that have fueled this terrible crisis. We can clearly see evidence of the rise of social media, increases in isolation, and for the purpose of this video, the increase in reliance on medication. A February 2024 study published through JAMA showcases prescribing patterns among patients 17 years old or younger enrolled in Medicaid from 2015 to 2020 in a single U.S. state that the researchers declined to name. There was a 9.5 increase in the prevalence of polypharmacy, which the study defined as taking 3 or more different classes of psychiatric medications. This includes antidepressants, mood-stabilizing anticonvulsants, sedatives, and drugs for ADHD and anxiety drugs. Another 2024 study through the American Academy of Pediatrics showcases that antidepressant prescriptions for teenagers have increased by 66.3% since January 2016. However, this study revealed that this is mainly true for female patients, as male patients actually experience a solid decrease. Now, this interpretation of the film and these statistics are to say that the meds in and of themselves aren't as problematic as the consistent existence of the root causes for the need of them with teenagers. In Donnie Darko, you could argue it's from despair and depression. In real life, the list goes on from anxiety to post-traumatic stress. Donnie, like many teenagers, hit an impasse due to the proper supplementary health care that they require not being fully provided. We can analyze other parts of the film to see where the gaps might be. Media and technology both began to change as well. All of these factors have only amplified over the past 20 years, leading to more disenfranchisement. What has changed over the years is that now we have access to more information, but this doesn't mean that people will change their behaviors. We are aware that social media causes mental health issues, yet we continue to use it despite the overwhelming evidence that it does cause harm.
This movie and its crew understood the emerging issue of using psychiatric medication for teenagers as a solution to their increasing anxiety and despair. Scenes in which Johnny tackles taking his meds or not feature dramatic lighting and visually signal how it is a conflict to grapple with his sense of things beyond him, given there are more mirroring images between how Donnie stares and contemplates his own being in the same spot he frequently encounters Frank. As the aforementioned results show, as well as the plot of Donnie Darko, the meds themselves aren't providing any solution to these vital human and spiritual issues. They're more of a short-term band-aid solution. So we can see that Donnie Darko remains relevant in this specific conflict, as teenage psychiatric medication use has drastically increased since the movie's release. Another crucial part of the film plays into this conflict, which is the culture that Donnie finds himself situated in. A big part of Donnie Darko is its criticisms of upper middle class American culture. The movie works to deconstruct a lot of the previously trusted institutions of the past with a post-secular lens. As we've explored earlier, the film is clearly concerned with the medical system of the United States, and another big institution on the chopping block here is the education system. The school in Donnie Darko is practically a joke, with more meaningful interactions between students and teachers either being cut short via the firing of Donnie's English teacher for sharing potentially morally ambiguous material, the self-cancellation of conversations with his science teacher due to getting into the bureaucratic and legally dangerous conversations around God and spirituality, and his health teacher imposing a particular brand of self-help that refuses to genuinely address the fear and the dread that its teenage audience might be experiencing.
As an aside, the conversations around the self-help scenes are some of the best in the movie. They add a lot of nuance to Donnie's character and his worldview. The ideas presented through Jim Cunningham's self-help tapes aren't necessarily wrong, but it's how they go about imposing them on kids. It allows the movie to showcase Donnie as being rather arrogant to those around him, and I think the movie wants you to recognize that he's a bit of a punk ass. Jim, Kitty, Karen, and Donnie aren't necessarily wrong in how they all talk about fear and love, but the movie invites us to discern and decipher whether these characters lack and where they might be wrong. For example, it's clear that the rampant self-determination and repressing of one's fears doesn't work for Jim Cunningham, given the later revelations that Donnie's arson reveals about Jim's child predator behavior, and that's putting it lightly. Yet one also witnesses how Donnie's total surrender to despair can lead to dangerous results for himself and to those around him. Relying on quick self-help solutions to appear normal is just one part of Donnie Darko's exploration of the upper middle class culture. Other parts of appearing normal in Donnie Darko's world include experiencing the dance of a picture-perfect American family. This actually gets used in the physical symbol of dance through Donnie's sister's performance. The scene, which showcases very young girls performing the sort of over-the-top, flashy pop, spectacle-focused dance, uses similar filming techniques to other scenes. The camera slows, lets the soundtrack take over a bit, and the characters move in slow motion. Similar to the opening scene of the school, the film wants to call attention to the sort of sluggish, wavy malaise of upper middle-class life. It relies on spectacle, yet it's also blech. The spectacle and normality doesn't mean much. The movie juxtaposes this with the more sped-up, rapid-paced experience of seeing things through the metaphysical and spiritual realm, shown through Donnie's ability to witness the various pathways one might take at any time. It's more exciting and feels more real. Other parts show a rejection of this culture to aim for higher things. Though these scenes visually convey this conflict, dialogue often showcases it too. For example, Donnie doesn't want to talk about how the Smurfs have sex. He wants to understand if God is real or not. Donnie doesn't care about the latest election talking points or the news of the town. He has to know if the world is going to be judged or not. We could also talk about the fact that religion began to dip in the 90s. The role of religion has been replaced by politics for much of the secular population, and even many who would consider themselves religious. The movie tends to make this clear as a large portion of family dinner talk is centered around the upcoming election in the movie. Additionally, the role of the importance of the family has been lessened for many and being ultimately replaced or treated as a second to a solid career. American culture hasn't changed much since Donnie Darko's release. If anything, there's ongoing concern that it's become more vapid on a large scale, and people are even more concerned with the image of normality due to social media. We've mentioned how division and discourse around political topics have experienced rapid changes for the worst in the series before, and there's something to be said about in terms of box office numbers and reading trends leaning more towards comfort, spectacle, spice, rather than stories that make us engage with hope, despair, love, fear, and other meaningful factors of the human condition. Now, to avoid getting too old man yells at cloud here, I'm aware that there are meaningful stories that are still out there, but the mainstream appeal doesn't currently lean this way. I'm also aware that this has been the case for a fair amount of time. It goes far past Donnie Darko's time, but the film is concerned with how a vapid culture focused on spectacle, image, and pure entertainment opens the door for the existential despair and gaps in Donnie Darko's character's experience. That is our same concern here. As media theorist Neil Postman perhaps prophetically stated in the 1980s in his seminal work Amusing Ourselves to Death, when a population becomes distracted by trivia, when cultural life is redefined by the perpetual sounds of entertainments, when serious public conversation becomes a form of baby talk, when in short, a people become an audience and their public business is a vaudeville act, then a nation finds itself at risk. Culture death is a clear possibility.
This concern about cultural death, which is also expressed in Donnie Darko, permits the movie to remain relevant to our post-secular moment. These points of contention get to the more fascinating and I think even more important part of Donnie Darko, the search for God. Though it may not seem like it on the surface, Donnie Darko's staying power also comes from being a deeply spiritual story. Writer and director Richard Kelly was greatly influenced by two books, Stephen Hawking's A Brief History of Time, which greatly informed its use of time travel and quantum physics, and Joseph Campbell's The Hero with a Thousand Faces, which greatly informed the story itself, its symbols, and themes. Joseph Campbell's work, which is sorta capstoned in 1949's The Hero with a Thousand Faces, focuses on how many myths and stories across cultures follow a common narrative pattern, which he called the monomyth, or the hero's journey. He also argues that myths from different cultures often share common themes and archetypes, reflecting universal human experiences and certain psychological truths. Campbell's analysis can be applied to everything from Hamlet to Star Wars to the Epic of Gilgamesh, as well as biblical stories such as the life of Samson and Moses. However, I find it fascinating how Donnie Darko's plot plays out, given its conclusion conflicts with many traditional understandings of the monomyth. In short, it begins with the hero receiving a call to adventure, which leads them to leave their ordinary world. The hero then faces challenges and temptations. They're often aided by mentors or supernatural beings of some sort. They undergo a central ordeal of transformation, gaining a reward or a new understanding. Finally, the hero returns to their ordinary world, changed by their experiences and able to use their new knowledge or power to benefit their community. All of this happens in Donnie Darko to some degree. Donnie's call to adventure comes twofold. It's already happening when we enter his story, as it's alluded to that his mental health and desire for understanding has been an ongoing journey for him. But it's given a catalyst when Frank claims the world will end in roughly 28 days. Donnie has mentors as his literal teachers, and as we mentioned earlier, one can interpret Frank as being a supernatural entity of sorts. A lot of Donnie's quest to stop the end of the world and obtain a further understanding of what exactly Frank is gets into the realm of theoretical physics. Much of his learning occurs between the book he receives from Roberta Sparrow and conversations with the science teacher. A telling moment occurs when he asks if someone would be able to see into the future as a form of time travel.
I beg your pardon?
Like a spear that comes out of your chest.
Sure, yeah. And in order for the vessel to travel through time, it's got to find a portal, or in this case, a wormhole, or...
Well, could these portals just appear anywhere, anytime?
I think that's highly unlikely. No, I think what you're talking about is an act of God.
Well, if God controls time, then all time's pre-decided.
I'm not following you.
Like, every living thing follows along a set path. And if you could see your path or channel, then you could see into the future, right? Like, that's a form of time travel.
Well, you're contradicting yourself, Donnie. If we were able to see our destinies manifest themselves visually, then we would be given a choice to betray our chosen destinies. And the mere fact that this choice exists would make all preformed destiny come to an end.
Not if you travel within God's channel.
I'm not going to be able to continue this conversation.
Donnie's teacher explains that seeing your own path would give you the option to betray it, destroying all preformed destiny, which Donnie counters by saying that if, quote, you travel in God's channel, end quote, this paradox would not occur. As we mentioned with failing institutions, their conversation stops there, as spirituality is a topic that Donnie's teacher cannot safely express given his role.
Through the use of strange, translucent tunnels, Donnie begins to see how people perhaps have a spirit that receives guidance from some greater force, allowing them to dictate what path they take and whether it's active or subconscious. Another moment that allows Donnie to understand himself as having a soul comes from Frank. He comments on Frank wearing a stupid bunny suit, and Frank quips back that Donnie has a stupid man suit. It's notable too that much of Donnie's interaction with Frank occurs around mirrors. Often, mirrors are used as a symbol between the physical and spiritual realms. This symbol allows the dialogue in these scenes to be set in a space that allows Donnie to explore how he perceives himself and the world around him. In a very meta moment, Donnie encounters Frank in a movie theater, which is to situate our understanding of movies as a mirror, which in turn is Donnie Darko having a wink to say we should view it as a mirror as well. It's kind of fun and clever. Donnie's spiritual journey furthers when he receives guidance from Frank to burn down Jim Cunningham's house. The film taps into the symbol of fire as being a deep cleansing, which the Bible is riddled with throughout, most notably in Numbers and Hebrews, in which God is considered a purifying and cleansing fire. I think it's clear that Donnie Darko wants this more spiritual lens listens for this moment, given the fire reveals to all the true character of Cunningham and ultimately exposes that he still succumbs to and is filled with the oppressive fear. Because of this too, I feel we have more room to interpret Frank as a sort of spiritual entity. Frank, whether we find him good or bad, is crucial to Donnie's spiritual journey and discovery of God, as well as interactions with him end up being revelatory or prophetic to some degree. This culminates in Donnie's ability to time travel, which is to say that he can exist briefly outside of time and space, similar to other spiritual beings, and sacrifice himself to those he loves.
Now, before we get into what Donnie Darko's climax means, I want to point out how Campbell's influence on Kelly and the film's crew plays out here. While it's not a straightforward example like The Odyssey, Donnie Darko contains plenty of elements that align with Campbell's monomyth structure. Here's a brief recap. The call to adventure. Donnie's journey begins when he sleepwalks out of his house and encounters Frank, who tells him the world is going to end in 28 days. Supernatural aid. Frank serves as a guide, giving Donnie instructions and information throughout the movie. Crossing the threshold. Donnie begins to question reality and investigate time travel, stepping into a world beyond his normal understanding. Tests and allies. Donnie faces various challenges, including confrontations at school and with his family. He also gains allies like his girlfriend Gretchen and his science teacher. Supreme ordeal. The climax of the film, where Donnie must make a choice to save the world and Gretchen by sacrificing himself. The return. In a sense, Donnie's return is his decision to go back in time and accept his death, using the wisdom he's gained to save others by stopping the events triggered by him not being in his bedroom at the time a plane engine falls into it. However, Donnie Darko subverts some aspects of the traditional monomyth. The return isn't triumphant, but sacrificial, which is key here. Rather than honor and glory guiding Donnie to the end of his heroic journey, it's sacrificial love. Though Jesus takes on all of humankind's sins to save them eternally, the motifs and themes that Donnie Darko uses situate Donnie as a Christ-like figure due to his sacrificial love to save others. It's for the same reason that Campbell struggled to include Jesus Christ in his monomyth. The God of the Bible comes close to fulfilling so much of the monomyth, yet he subverts the most crucial part compared to other foundational myths. We don't have to reject Campbell's analytical lens because of this though. Rather, we can see where it's pointing. It's because of these tensions that scholar C.S. Lewis once wrote, quote, "For this is the marriage of heaven and earth, perfect myth and perfect fact, claiming not only our love and obedience, but also our wonder and delight, addressed to the savage, the child, and the poet, in each of us, no less than to the moralist, scholar, and the philosopher." End quote. I think this is the most crucial thing that gives Donnie Darko its staying power. It deals with themes and struggles that are eternal. A cornerstone of post-secular texts we've analyzed has not just been the physical and mental despair that Donnie Darko explores, but more crucially, the spiritual despair and desire for spiritual fulfillment. We still find Donnie's struggle compelling because it aligns with many of the cultural and sociological battles we see our communities going through right now, but also the spiritual battles and journeys our society is experiencing. Post-secular texts invite us to go into the struggle with varying answers and sometimes no answer at all. But a great thing about Donnie Darko is how it sees a way through in the hope and love for others. It doesn't mean the ending is grand. Rather, it's somber, the lighting is low, there is no soundtrack, shots linger on crying faces for an extended period, but Donnie experiences the spiritual freedom and fulfillment he has been searching for. Through God's divine will and his channel, Donnie sacrifices himself for others, hence his joy and laughter as he teleports back in time. To return to Kierkegaard briefly, he writes, quote, "Despair is another aspect of spirit. It has to do with the eternal in a person. But the eternal is something he cannot be rid of, not in all eternity. If there were nothing eternal in a man, he would simply be unable to despair. Having a self, being a self, is the greatest, the infinite, the concession that has been made to man, but also eternity's claim on him." End quote. Despair is an eternal spiritual struggle for humans. Donnie Darko grapples with it excellently, and then it showcases how sacrificial love and submission to God's power will lead one out of it. Because of its poignant exploration of these themes and ideas, Donnie Darko will continue to resonate with people, I think both old and young, for years to come, even if it's kind of cringy at times. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you got something entirely different from Donnie Darko, please let me know in the comments below. I would love to see a discussion starting down there around, I think, the various ways someone can interpret this very strange and unique movie. If you like this video, please give it a like so it can get to others that might also be interested in it as well. If you didn't like it, you can let me know that as well. Anything helps me out. If you find the topic of this video, post-secularism, to be interesting, please consider seeing the other videos I have on this channel. Also, if you like reading and enjoy long-form book reviews and book lists, I have content like that on this channel as well, so please consider checking those out. Again, thank you so much for joining me in this exploration, and I will see you all in our next exploration.